Welcome to selfdiscoverywisdom.com, formerly known as Self-Discovery Media. On these podcasts, you're going to hear people who speak from the heart. They've taken the journey in life. Many things have happened to them, but they've changed it to happening for them. And in their strength, their courage, they've discovered their abilities and their wisdom, and they are now sharing it here with you. Do enjoy each show. We bring it to you with love and knowing that it's going to help you on your journey of life. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. Welcome back to another edition of Their Story Matters right here on selfdiscoverywisdom.com. I'm your host, Sarah Troy, and all the way from Ireland is our guest, Lacy. We're going to be talking about Yankeeland. It is a sweeping tale of hope and resilience and transformation that waves through the decades and the continents. Inspired by the real-life discovery of hundreds of letters between her grandmother in Ireland and her great-aunt who emigrated to America, revealing family secrets from a century ago. Imagine uncovering generations of family secrets hidden in two mailbags filled with the letters and postcards, some never opened for 70 years. That's what happened to Lacy in Ireland when she inherited the belongings of her late grand aunt. Though the correspondence between the sisters, one in Ireland and one in America, Fewer unearthed a moving family saga shaped by hope, silence, and struggle. She discovered painful truth of her great-aunt's 30-year institutionalization for being unable to conceive. Oh my God. A tragic reflection on how mental health and womanhood were misunderstood in the early 20th century. Now, decades after her first reading the letters with her own experience of growing up with siblings and facing mental health and challenges, Fewer has penned Yankeeland, an award-winning novel inspired by these revelations. The story reflects the immigrant dream and shadow of stigma, hardship, and capturing not only what was, but what might have been. Oh my goodness, just that one thing institutionalized. It's horrific what they used to do with women. And of course, what they're trying to do right now, turn the clock backwards there. But, women having hysteria, like if she raised her voice, lock her up, as how husbands got rid of women. And I mean, but what a treasure chest to find these letters and these postcards and see your whole family there, the history between them and the history of what was at that time. That's quite exciting. What was it like your first time?
So thank you so much, Sarah, for having me on. I am delighted to be on today and to have a connection with your wonderful listeners. Your podcast is fantastic. I love what you do. I love that you've been 12 years doing this, the books that you write. So thank you so much. I'm absolutely honoured to be part of this. I'm coming all the way from Dublin in Ireland. It's really exciting. So it's great to connect. So thank you, Sarah. Yes. So Yankeeland is a family drama, and it was inspired by the letters that I discovered some 30 years ago between two cousins. So my grandaunt had emigrated to America in 1908, and the letters were across the Atlantic, from Ireland to America and from America to Ireland. And as I weaved my way through these two black sacks that were handed to me, I started to uncover these really deep secrets. And the pain that was held, Sarah, within those bags was phenomenal. To see that you could live your life and for the truth of your existence to not have been known in your lifetime, and that it took for me 2 generations later, or 3-4 generations later, to come along and to really get in behind that story. So yes, it is a work of historical fiction. It is in the early 1900s. And for me, it was really looking at the woman's journey in history and how it has played out to modern day. And when you look at the foundation of how women were in society in those days, and they didn't have a voice, they were very much living in patriarchal societies, Sarah. Yeah.
And, just going to Ireland in 1908, whereas like whenever you have an onslaught of a particular nation going to America, then the attack is on by the people that are there. And the Irish were not well accepted. right? They had their own battle and they got there to survive. And you just have to look at some of the historical shows that are out showing immigrants coming to America, and the pioneers, and what happened to them. And
Mm.
it's like already that struggle is there from him. But you look at, if you were rich, it was a totally different structure. If you were just even middle class and poor, well, that's when it's almost you were disposable. And it really is quite horrific when we look at that. But through the ages, that's the way it's been, and really time for change.
It is very much so. And what was interesting, what my publisher felt about this story, and I chose an American publisher because there's a huge Irish American audience.
Yes.
And in Canada as well, you have a huge Irish audience. So that's why I went with a publisher as opposed to an Irish publisher, because I wanted this story
Yeah.
to really be heard. I think it's a hugely important female historical
Hmm.
story. And what was a little bit different about this story, Sarah, was that they weren't leaving poverty. So Bridget, my main character, was not leaving destitution. She wasn't your typical immigrant. She actually came from a very affluent background. She was following her dream.
Mm.
And I felt her passion behind wanting to. She was a very powerful woman. I know from her letters she was strong, she was educated, and she was chasing her dream. And she drove that whole, moving from Ireland to America. Her brother travels with her. She's newly married. Her husband goes with her, but she was the driving force behind this. But we know, and we all know, that life doesn't always play out
Yeah.
the way we plan.
Hmm.
And she came up against a lot of resilience was required.
We needed strong women back then as we do now. And there are those women that in history that they've tried to suppress, but historians will bring them out, that are the pioneers that have led the way. But they got punished for it. A
Mm,
strong woman at that time was a threat to men
mm,
and to their ego, to their manhood. And they didn't respect a strong woman. And of course, a strong Irish woman, there's a force
mm.
to be reckoned with right there, right? So she was already up
Absolutely.
up against the wind, just being strong.
I felt, Sarah, that me being able to tell her story, so I delved deeply into the rich history of Ireland
Hmm.
and America, and they lived initially in Niagara Falls, and I really delved into the history of that. And I had to put myself into the context of the time.
Hmm.
So my male characters, so the reviews so far, the early reviews have been really strong. And most people have seen that the male characters I do actually portray in a very positive light because they were of their time, Sarah.
Mm.
So it was the patriarchal systems that I call out. So the religious systems and the medical systems.
Yeah.
They were the two key systems in Yankeeland where you will see how the woman's worth was to marry, to have children. How
Hmm.
many children would you have? What was your home like?
Hmm.
And God forbid that a woman would consider education.
Right.
There was just absolutely no need. They
Hmm.
actually felt that educating a woman was an absolute detriment to her well-being. So when you look at
What a good
all that,
excuse.
a really good excuse. So the male characters in Yankeeland were of their time. They were good people. I researched them. I researched their personalities as best as I could, and I did try to stick to that. However, the doctors and the sort of religious aspect of the book are probably not painted in a very strong light because, again, they were of their time.
When you say of your time, when you look at religion right now,
Mm,
I feel that people hide behind a God, and then that it's given them permission to do whatever they want, rather than actually understanding what the message of God really is. And that love thy neighbor, support each other, be there for each other. It becomes a segregation in itself. In God's name, I will. But just look at the Crusaders, for goodness sake,
mhm.
the what they did. And, we're seeing that still very much there today, where it becomes, well, I'm a Christian. So therefore, I'm right, you're wrong, and I will persecute you because God has told me to do so. No, that
mm,
is, kind of like the devil is whispering in your ear here with the face of
mm,
God. And they did have the power. And in some areas, they still do have the power to manipulate. Hopefully, medically, we've become better, although
mm,
obviously there's some things going backwards over in the US right now, but we've become better. And mental health has now become a topic that we talk about and that we look at and try and understand and we don't persecute people for. But back in
mm,
the day, what was mental health? As I said, if a woman who she has hysteria, what, just
mm.
because she had a fight with you and you didn't like what she had to say, now you got to lock her up and marry someone else. It became a convenience for men rather than a right for
Absolutely.
women.
Absolutely. And I was able to draw on a lot of lived experience, Sarah. So I have three siblings who were diagnosed with bipolar in the early 1990s.
Mm,
So when I write in this story and I write about the experiences that the characters have with mental health, I do write from lived experience.
mm,
But I also recall as a child, a very young child, my mother had an elderly relative, a female, who was locked up in an institution in Dublin. And she was there for most of her adult life. And every Sunday, I would go with my mum to this institution through all the huge, big, heavy iron locked doors. I remember all the keys. And I remember entering into this big light filled room with all of these women sitting on chairs on the perimeter, on the corner of the room. And they all sat with their handbags on their knees, Sarah. And I would come in as a very young child. I was maybe 6, 7, 8 years of age, and they would feel my hair and they would ask me to sit with them and talk to them. And I vividly remember that experience. But what I
yeah,
remember most is walking home with my mother and with her cousin, and how distraught they both were, saying that most of those women had no need to be there.
right. Exactly.
So that was in my lifetime. So that's
Yes.
in the 1970s in
Yes.
Ireland.
Mm,
So you can only imagine in
yeah.
1920, 1930 what that was like. And there's an interesting aspect to Yankeeland that some readers have spoke to me about. And there are two characters who are affected with mental health. One stays in Ireland and one follows her dream and goes to live in America, and they both have different outcomes. And the question has been asked so many times, who had the better life?
Mm,
And I would throw that out to potential readers to think about that for themselves. Being in Ireland and staying in most definitely in 1920s Ireland, 1910, 1950 Ireland, we were considerably behind the
mm,
USA in a number of aspects. We've caught up in more recent times, be that for good or for bad, but we
mm,
have. But back then, so there's a real question there. What do readers feel? Do they feel the character Bridget, who went to America, the outcome of her journey versus Kate, who stayed in Ireland? So,
mm.
yeah, it's a really interesting piece to
So,
consider.
kind of whether they went or whether they stayed, they were still victims of the times. And,
Ah,
and the times dictation. And where did that times dictation come from? It wasn't women, it was men, right? And again,
um,
always to suit them, not the woman. Uh, God forbid a woman should have a brain or the power or the
mm,
intelligence or to be independent, because that for them made them feel less than. Instead of
mm,
celebrating the woman, which now we see that change now where men, a lot of men, not all men, are
mhm,
celebrating women's strength and loving the strength and the common sense. I started a new show genre called the Sisterhood of Common Sense, and all the men that love common sense love, and all the men that love and support them. And it is actually for
um,
people who have a foundation or something to give back and help the women that have been neglected at the present moment and how we can help them get back up again. I think that's
mm,
really the fear. When you've got a bunch of strong women, we
mm,
do step into common sense. We do come from a place of love, and we're not going to talk and waffle about it. We're going to get it done. And
mhm,
that becomes a threat to the man
mm,
that really likes to waffle about it and get somebody else to do it. So it's I know I sound like I'm men bashing, but all of these things were run by men. The doctors, the churches, the government, the everything was run by men. Women didn't have a say. They didn't have any power at all. And we're
No,
still all
they
this
didn't.
time still fighting for power today.
There was a wonderful book that I used in my research called The Lady's Guide in Health and Disease. And it was written by a doctor, John Harvey Kellogg, and it was published, Sarah, in 1893. And it is a fascinating read. And there was a couple of little extracts that I read out on my socials. And one of them was declaring, so this was actually in the preface, they were sort of giving out about the rise in women's filling up the doctor surgeries, the physician surgeries, and they were trying to allude to the fact that it was all just in their head, all
Mhm.
nervousness.
Yes, of course.
And they spoke about how, women now have gynecologists to look after their internal organs, similar to how they have a milliner to do their headwear or a dressmaker for their clothes. And then they go on to say how the male brain is 4.5 ounces heavier or larger than the female brain. So
That doesn't mean they use it.
how could a woman expect to compete with a male? And this, Sarah, was a bestseller. This was a bestseller in the early 1900s and it went out to all the physicians. So you're right. When you look at history and when you look back at women and how women were perceived, it really is no surprise that we ended up where we did. And that's why we need to celebrate those women that were
Yeah,
strong.
yeah,
I believe Bridget, my main character, was a wonderfully powerful, strong woman. And for me, telling this story, it was so important for me to give her a voice. She
yes.
was voiceless in her time. I
Mm.
am now giving her a voice, and I have felt her with me every step of the way on this journey. I have had the most wonderful coincidences on this journey, and I know that she has been helping me, Sarah.
Right.
So it's an honor.
Mm. And that's the beauty when you open up to this. You opened up to her story and you allowed her in, not just through
Mm.
the writing, but conduitly allowing her in to guide you. Because if we don't learn from history, we repeat it. And, of
Mm.
course, right now in America, they're trying to delete history and rewrite it. And it's like, no, there's too much history out there in the world. We must preserve it. We must educate people on it because otherwise it gives them permission. I don't know if you know the show Handmaid's Tale.
Oh, yes,
Right.
yes,
So, I
yes.
kind of talk about what's happening in America right now, the Handmaid's Tale syndrome, where in
Mm.
that is the women can't breed anymore. So if anybody had a child, then they become really just the vessel to breed for these other people. Women can't even have a Bible. They're completely and utterly suppressed around these men. And yeah, if you're gay, if you're, neurodivergent, anything, you're eliminated. And
Wow.
the person who wrote it, Anne, can't remember her surname. She
Mm.
said that everything that she put into this series, into this book, was facts that were happening in various parts of the world, and she just put it together, as a one story happening in America. But and I keep saying when I see things like what's happening right now, it's the Handmaid's Tale syndrome, where the men would like to go backwards and have the women have no saying, just become breeders, run the home, and that's it. That's their desire for where women should
Ab-
be, and that's still very much
Absolutely.
alive in certain parts of the country. And I'm in Canada, so probably in Canada somewhere as well. But as women, we need to celebrate the women that went before us. We need to
Mm.
look at their story, their struggling, their strife, because they showed us their resilience, they showed us their courage, they showed us their strength, they showed us their voice, and in turn, they give us our voice.
Absolutely, Sarah. So important. And when you mention history and women's stories, I have a wonderful quote here that I might read from one of the awards that I won for Yankeeland. And I just thought it was really relevant to what you're talking about with regard to history. So the quote says, "Have you ever felt that history has quietly erased stories that should have been shouted from the rooftops?"
Mm.
In Yankeeland, viewers, historical fiction unearths one such tale, forcing us to reconsider the past we think we know. Um, so it was beautiful that they really got in under the fact that this
Mm,
is not a fairy tale. So
no.
Yankeeland is absolutely not. It is raw, it is real, it is based on true events. So, and it's really important that we talk about these things and that
Yes.
we, that we learn and we look at it. And I really believe that we are a product of those that went before us.
Mm-hmm.
And we carry them in our DNA and our genetics. So
Mm-hmm.
it's so important because if we don't learn from history, and we're seeing that at the moment play out
Yes.
in certain aspects, and if we don't learn, Sarah, what's it all for? So important that we honor it and we learn from it. So important.
I kind of got a saying, we're reborn and you can't put us back in the womb. We ain't
Yeah.
going back. We're born. We have a voice. We as a sisterhood will stand together. And I said there are plenty of men that will stand side by side with us, even be the wind behind our backs, because they respect the strength of a woman, the value of a woman, right?
Mhm.
It's the people that are insecure within themselves, that feel less than in themselves, that want to suppress another. And
Mhm.
what we have to do, and this is something I'm always a big advocate on, it doesn't matter who you are, black, white, pink, yellow, polka dot, gay, straight, who cares, what religion or anything else yet. We are all responsible for our own lives. We aren't responsible for what happens to us, but we are responsible for what we do with it,
Mhm.
right? And
100%.
and that's the thing, is that your characters in the book, which I haven't read, but sound like they tried to do something about it. And even though they were shackled in the sense, then you doing this book now is doing something about it,
Mhm.
because you're showing them, look, this wasn't so long ago. Pay attention to what's happening around there, because some of these things are beginning to happen again or are
Mhm.
happening. And if we don't learn from history, we do repeat it. And this is the era of woman to stand up in her strength and go, no,
Mhm. Not on my watch. Well,
not in my watch. No.
not on my watch. I have always struggled with walking past a behavior I don't accept.
Yeah. Yes.
So I have
I love
always
that. I love the
embodied,
way you put that. That's beautiful.
yeah, I have always embodied that. And I worked at a senior level in finance for a long time, and I
Mm,
worked mostly male colleagues. And
yeah.
I most often, Sarah, the only female at the table. And particularly in the corporate world, people can tend to overlook poor behaviors,
Mm,
particularly if, the bottom line is being delivered. I have always struggled with it. And because of that, yes, and because of that, though, you can come up against adversity
oh,
because
all the time.
society loves the people who are quiet and demure and don't challenge them. But but that's just who I am. My son said to me one day, Mum, every family needs somebody like you or nothing will get done.
Exactly.
So
The common sense love, right? It's the mama
the
thing, rolling up the
common
sleeves.
sense,
Yes.
100%. So when I found these letters in 1993, and when my siblings were first diagnosed with their mental health struggles, and they're sitting in front of the doctors, any family history? No, no, no. And a year later, I uncover actually there is a family history going back to the mid 1800s, and nobody had spoken about it, nobody had talked
Mm,
about it, it was hidden, it was just completely pushed away. And I was really angry, actually, Sarah. I was really angry that my siblings were now experiencing this.
yeah.
And yet, had we have known, could we possibly have prepared? And
Mm,
some readers who have read Yankeeland have come back to me and said that they have experienced mental health struggles in their family, and they have found out that it was in the past and it was never spoken of. And they wonder if it would have changed the outcome for the current members of their family. And I believe that. I believe
yeah.
that it's a reality, it's there. I think we're all touched by mental health struggles at
Yes,
different times.
absolutely.
Everyone, we're human and we will all struggle. And that's why it's a real comfort, Sarah, to go hand in hand. If we do this together and we support each other
Mm.
together, I think it is really the only way forward.
No shame, no blame, just understanding, right? With
Absolutely.
compassion. And actually interesting to add to that. Um, my mother was born in India. Her father was a colonel in the British Army. So
Wow.
she was number 7 child, and there were 2 more after her. And at the age of 12, she went from this rather opulent lifestyle where they were looked after and everything else, went over to England. And now they're all crammed in this kind of one little pokey house. And it was because she was told her father had died, right? So in her 70s, she meets her uncle. And her uncle will say, look, you were your father's favorite. They both love words. My mother was an actress, and my brother is an author. I'm a
Wow.
speaker, so words run in the family, right? The love of
Beautiful.
words. And later she gets back then a telegram, right, to tell her your father's
Mm.
dead. And she goes, what do you mean my father's dead? He died when I was 12. No, the man you met wasn't your uncle, it was your father.
Oh,
And she was so furious because she wanted to have a relationship with him.
oh,
But do you know
wow.
why they said that he was dead? Because he had to go into institution. He had post-traumatic stress disorder or something
Oh,
else. And because it was so shameful, especially for somebody so high up in the army, right?
mhm.
It was better that he be dead. And the older sisters knew, but they didn't tell the middle to younger ones, not even when they were older. And so my
Wow.
mother was absolutely furious because she and her father, even when she thought he was the uncle, that love of words, they would have, she probably would have had a different life. And maybe he would
Oh,
have too, right?
that, that is harrowing. And it's interesting that you mentioned that because I have a line in the first chapter of Yankeeland where and I'm not giving away any spoilers, but where Bridget's mum passes away, and it was postpartum, very common in the day when you had a
Mhm.
child. But I say here for Bridget, the day her mother had died, all sense of belonging died with her. An ache remained and a want to escape this life that had been shattered by grief.
Mm,
And that led some readers to talk to me about the secrets,
yeah.
how at that point in the book, the children weren't told.
No,
All they knew was their mother just didn't come home.
exactly.
They
Mother
had
had
no idea.
abandoned them as far as they're concerned, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, like your mother, you conjure up all these
Yes.
stories in your own mind because
Yeah.
we, as humans, we fill the gaps. And
Yes.
the trauma for anybody, particularly a child, Sarah, as they go through life, is they carry that belief and that story that they've made up. And it comes all the way through into adulthood. And it most definitely, nearly always ends in some form of post-traumatic stress. So, your poor mother, that is hideous to think
Yeah.
that she
Well,
lied to me.
then of course, with my father, who died at 45,
Oh,
is his second big heart attack. First one was at 40, and his was from the war. He was a squadron leader, fighter pilot, and at the end of the war, there were only 2 of them left out of his squadron, and he'd gone through quite a few squadrons at that point. And he was a racing car driver. He was this and that, ran his own business with a brother he hated. And the stress just, I think, finally got to him. But there was no talking about the war. It was stiff upper lip. Oh boy, we don't talk about those things. And I think that it just started eating him alive, and the anxiety and the stress just got so much, right? And
absolutely.
I know in my parameters, I've only found out recently I have ADD, but I knew I had dyslexia. But
Right.
it
Wow.
was it was had I known, if we had talked about mental health, if we had talked about what stress can do, if we had talked about it and took away the stigma of it,
Hmm.
right? Like, oh, you're defective because. No, we're not defective,
No,
right? This is just the
we're
way we're
human.
wired. We're human. This
We're
is the way we
human.
wired. This is the way we interact. I have a
Mm.
grandson with Down syndrome. He's the most beautiful little boy. Is he going to be slower to learn? Yes. Does he care? No. He's
No,
such
yeah.
a happy, beautiful little soul that just
Oh, yeah.
enjoys every moment. So he's a great
Absolutely.
example to us to how to be present and
Oh,
enjoy what
yeah.
it is. But in
Oh,
the past, people would hide their children and send them off to institutions because the shame, there was something wrong with you for having a child like this. The same with autism. No, we're just differently wild and, as a beautiful word, differently abled.
I saw that actually when I was looking at your website. I loved it. I hadn't
Mm.
heard that before. So I've taken a note of that. I think that's fantastic, Sarah. So you should say you've coined that phrase, which I'm sure
No,
you
it
have.
was from one of my
Beautiful.
guests and who worked
Beautiful.
with people with that, and I just said to her, beautiful, because
Yeah.
disability somehow
Yeah.
makes people feel less than,
Different.
differently
Yeah.
abled. It's just we're abled in a different way.
I think it's
There's
beautiful.
also another beautiful word, flawsome.
Oh,
I love
oh,
flawsome. I mean, flawsome is we're all flawed in some way or other. We're all
mm,
cracked in our bowl of life. It's how do we put ourselves back together? We put ourselves
yeah.
back together with self-love. And then that
Yeah.
big old bowl becomes
Absolutely.
really stronger. We celebrate our flaws as an asset rather than a detriment, right?
Oh, beautiful, beautiful, Sarah. And just as you're talking there, when we talk about secrets, so and again, I've got a lot of feedback from readers of Yankeeland just about the theme of secrets, and I
Mm,
have the letters actually framed behind me there. I don't know if you
nice,
can see them,
nice.
but they're in my epilogue. I do say, and I'd like to clarify that I have no doubt the secrets in this story came from a place of love.
Yeah,
Surely truth is a far greater act of love. Information is power, and overcoming secrets offers liberation from the shackles of the past, allowing for progress and hope in humanity.
absolutely. Perfect.
So it's really important that, yes, people have secrets and there are good secrets and I acknowledge that, but surely truth is a far greater act of love, and in my
Yeah,
characters, for those that do read Yankee Land, and I hope that people enjoy it and read it, they will see that had the truth of the characters, the female characters' existence been known in their lifetime, it would have given them the freedom.
yes,
And coming into the modern day, just when you talk about mental health, Sarah, as well, I believe so. Having been a sibling of a sufferer and been involved in the care of people who have struggled with mental health, I believe one area that's, I think, under looked at and is the impact and the experience of the carer. So
yes.
quite often, a lot of the focus goes to the person who has the ailment at that time.
Mm-hmm.
But I think of all the times and all through the years, and I know a lot of people who are now supporting people who are struggling with mental health, and there's very little focus on asking them how are they,
Yeah,
how are they finding it? Do they need support? What outlets do they have? And I think it's really important because they're the voice. You
yeah,
are the voice for the person who is struggling. So you need to be supported. And women most often are carers in these cases.
absolutely.
So I would say to anyone who's in that experience or going through that at this time, don't underestimate caring for yourself too and getting help
Exactly.
and getting support. Very important, Sarah.
Very important. Yeah, and I've done shows on that. What about the caregivers? They burn
Wonderful.
out, and everything is put on them, and they don't want to
Oh,
let the person down. In the meantime, they're being depleted, and they all oxygenate yourself, right? If you can't breathe, you can't help anyone else, and I think that's part of as saying that I'm in a new book that's coming out this
beautiful.
week. I'm not selfish. I'm not easily manipulated, and I
Oh,
contributed a chapter to that. But it is about it's not selfish to have self-care. It is not
yeah.
selfish to have self-love. It is imperative because when you are looking after yourself and you are abundant in love, that's when your cup runneth over. But your cup
Mm-hmm.
can't run over from depletion.
Oh, that is beautiful, Sarah. That book sounds like it will be much needed
Yeah.
for people who are in caregiver roles. I
Yes.
used to sometimes feel, particularly when I wasn't directly affected, but some of my siblings were,
Mm.
there is like survivor syndrome
Yes. Yes. Uh-huh.
where, I escaped nearly,
Yeah.
but you have this guilt
Yeah.
that it wasn't you, and that, what could you ever be unhappy about? What could I
Mm.
complain about in
Mm.
life? And, that's not honoring my own journey and my own
No.
experiences. And of course, you have a huge amount of concern and worry as a person, who's surrounded by that. So I think the caregiver is sometimes an area that needs a lot of focus too, because,
Absolutely.
yeah.
And it starts with us placing that care on ourselves and be willing to be vulnerable and willing to ask for help.
Mhm.
Right. And I think,
And
it goes back to, underline all of this. It's somebody else's dictation of what normal is.
Mm-hmm.
You've got to fit into this box. That's normal. If you're anything outside of the box, then you're defective. And what do we look at what's normal? Well, if you look at what people perceive as normal, I don't want to be a part of that normal. It's
Mm-hmm.
not
Mm-hmm.
inclusive, it's not caring, it's not loving. And, I talk a great deal in the shows, which is very much what we're talking about here. Societal's expectation and dictation. You've got to be this to be liked. You've got to be that to be loved. You've got to be this to be accepted. You're only important if you do this. And if
Mm-hmm.
you don't fit into those criteria, then you're dismissed and you're nothing. And I think I don't want to be a part of that normal. I haven't got anything to prove. You can take me or leave me. The only person I need to prove anything to is myself.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And we have to change what we think is the norm. And when we look at how many people have neurodiversity, autism or stress or in post, as you said, bipolar or anything, there's so many today. Why? Is it because we're not addressing what they need? Are they their label? As I say,
Mm-hmm.
I have ADD, I have dyslexia. I'm not that label. That is just my challenge.
Oh, yeah, I
That's
think that's
just
wonderful.
it's the if you know that about me, you know that that's the way I'm going to interact. And I may speak Yoda now and again, right?
Yeah,
So, and it's like it doesn't take away from who I am. It's just what carries with me. And I think this is something we need to look at. Stop labeling people. Oh, you're bipolar. No, you're a person who has this. So if
yeah.
you
Who's
understand you have this, then maybe you could be a little bit more compassionate and understanding on what they need. There's actually something I have to say here that is we have a show here called Survivor that's been around for about 20 years. And it's people stranded on an island and it's how they survive and
I
competitions and
think
this and
I've
that.
heard of it. Yeah.
And there's a young girl that's on right now with autism. And in her first group, she trusted a guy who was a father. And she said, look, if I do have a meltdown, this is what you do. And then they get separated onto different groups. And she did this competition, which she won, but she just went into a complete meltdown. She was crying uncontrollably, hardly being able to breathe. And the guy came over to her. I can almost tear up when I watch this. Just calmed her down, held her hand, did everything that she had asked him to do, and brought her right down. And it was like, you're not less than. You're in trouble right now. All I have to do is just help you, bring you down, show you I care, bring that level down. The ripple effect it had on everyone was so
Wow.
profound. It's not like, oh, she has autism. It's like, my God, look what she
Um,
can do, even though she has autism, right?
that is beautiful, Sarah.
I think
And
that particular episode, I think, is going to be one that's going to be talked about for a long time.
I must look it up because that sounds phenomenal because you're right. We do label everybody.
Yes, yes,
It's how we function in this world. It's our incessant need to give somebody a label and a title. And I would ask for compassion
yes,
when you are dealing with somebody or when you experience somebody in society. So I have come across times where I have been with people who are really vulnerable. And it is really sad that I can recall only a number of occasions where people have been really kind to them, really considerate, patient,
yeah.
not dismissive and rude. And, because that's the norm. I see it
Mm,
because I
hmm
see
hmm
it where that happens. Because if we don't present
mm,
as people want us to present, it is society are very impatient. Sarah, which is unfortunate. So it's wonderful to hear you talk about that example because obviously that gentleman was
yes,
patient. But I think it's really important to be present. A lot of
yes.
people are in their past, they're in
Hmm
their future. When I think with age, I have learned through my own adversity in life and through my own journey and connecting with my heart center and my own
hmm
spiritual journey, I have learned all we have is now. All we have is this
Yes.
moment right now with you,
This is
Sarah.
the gift of the present.
This is the gift of the present. And to just honor that and
Yes.
be here for this moment. But it's not an easy journey to get to there. It takes work, but it is a
Yeah.
wonderful gift when you get there.
I think
Wonderful
that's
gift.
the reason why, you writing the book some 30 years later, obviously the
Mhm.
stories had an impact. And then you had, your siblings going for what they're doing, your own life to live, but it stayed with you and seeded and grew. And then you opened up. I'm very much about channeling and opening up and letting what I call the universe channel through you, in this case, her energy coming through you, directing you and giving you the sense of who she was or who they were, and a sense, of the essence of their energy. But you received, you allowed, some 30 years ago, you might not have been ready to do this. And now you were, because everything happens in its right time. And if you think about it, it's a perfect time for the book to come out, to talk about this. Not only, there's many TV shows on right now that are addressing the pioneers. There was 18, it's part of the Yellowstone series. There was 1889 and then 1923, and it's all around this ranch they're trying to save, etc. But it's the pioneers and what they went through, coming here. What you're talking about, with one of the cousins coming to America, is that dream. I believe this is possible. I want to go and explore the opportunity. And today, we can go to countries and explore these opportunities so much easier than they could back in that day. The bravado of her coming over, even with husband and everything else, never expecting what to happen to her, happening to her. But without their dreams, without their taking action on those dreams, where would we be?
I know. Well, I know for sure I wouldn't be here today because it was Bridget taking that journey that has me here. And being Irish, we have a wonderful culture and heritage with traditions and spirituality. But I'll tell you a little story. I had a very successful career, as I said, in finance. And for a long time, I wanted to write this story, and I had done research, and I'd gone to San Francisco, Sarah, and all that. I was making a decision in January 2022 about whether I would move full time into writing. And it was a very big decision because I was leaving behind quite a lot.
Yes.
And I had to make a decision, and they were making it difficult for me to leave because I was being given more and more opportunity, which is wonderful and I'm grateful for, but it didn't help when I wanted to write.
Right. That's the way the universe works, though. It gives you that
Is the
crossroad.
way. That is the way.
Are you listening to your head or your heart?
Absolutely. Well, when you hear this story, you'll know I listen to my heart. So I was awoken at 4 a.m. on a Sunday night into a Monday morning by somebody physically taking my shoulders and shaking me, pulling me up out of my sleep and physically shaking me. Now, this is the only time in my life this has ever happened. If you had told me, Sarah, going to bed that night it was going to happen, I would never have fallen asleep.
Right.
So I remember sitting up and I gasped, and I remember feeling my body and saying, I'm awake, I'm awake. And I looked at my husband, who was sleeping peacefully, and I kept telling myself, this is real, this is real. And I looked to the corner of my room and I saw a female figure, an adult female figure. And my logical mind made me call out my adult daughter's name. So I called my daughter's name 2 or 3 times. And as I did, this woman disappeared. And I was not frightened. I was really calm, but I was incredibly aware that I was awake and that this had happened. So I lay back down and I was feeling my body. I'm awake. This has happened. And I went back to sleep and I was very calm. And the first thing the next morning, I woke up and I texted my friend who I was with the day before. And then she rang me and she said, who do you think it was? And I felt really silly. And I said, I can't believe I'm saying this, but it was my very, very close friend who understood me. And I said, I whispered, I actually think it was Bridget coming to tell me to write the story and to shake me out of my indecision. And it was on that basis, Sarah, that I left behind a 30-year career in finance, and I've written Yankeeland.
Bravo, bravo, bravo. I love people that take a redirect and follow their heart and soul passion. Bravo.
Yeah. So it was an absolutely real experience. I am an incredibly logical person, and I can tell you now that happened. And now that the book is out and it has been received so well, I'm actually more confident telling that story. And whether people believe or don't believe, I really don't care, because it's real to me and it happened.
Right.
And I have felt supported every step of this way. I have felt Bridget cheering me along from the sidelines and paving the way. And the universe is very real, I can tell you that.
Absolutely. And, for me, that's what I encourage people to feel. I think half the time the problem is we think too much. And, a
Hmm.
thought entices another thought. Yeah, but what? Yeah, but what if? Yeah, but what if? But when you feel, I call that the knowingness. When the
Oh,
universe speaks through your soul in wisdom, it gives it to your heart in truth. It gives it to your spirit in action for your mind to know what it needs to know in clarity when it needs to know it.
beautiful.
And you know it the truth. You don't need to verify, validate, or justify. It just is.
Mhm. Isn't that beautiful?
And that's
I
what you
love that.
experience there. That's what you
Uh,
experience there.
100%.
Hmm.
And it was so real. And I have heard people talking before about these experiences, and I
Been
suppose,
through many of them.
oh, wonderful.
That's my
Oh,
journey.
well,
I can't do anything. If I
oh,
think it, I'll make the wrong decision. I have to
oh,
wait for the
beautiful.
spirit to move me and show me that path. So it's
Beautiful.
always guided by that. That's always been, my guidance system, my
Mm,
force of divine energy. And it speaks to us
beautiful.
all the time. Any single one of us can open up to that,
Mm,
and I'm so glad you did speak about that because you come from
good.
finances, numbers, and logic. And then
Good.
this happened
Yes.
to you, and you trusted it. Bless you for trusting it and taking this journey because this is where the universe wanted you to go. And
Yeah.
from this, you will see it will open up to so many more opportunities and more
Well, I
books.
can already say, Sarah, the journey has been phenomenal. I
Hmm.
do say to people, when you make these decisions, it's not a path paved with roses. Of
No,
course,
God, no.
anything we do in life takes work.
Hmm.
Um, but I think that if you meet the universe halfway, it will give you the signs and give you the opportunities. You need to put in the hard work. And I think
Yes.
if you do, you will get the rewards.
It's a
But
different form of hard work, though, isn't it?
yeah,
Because there's that hard
oh,
work where you feel it nothing pays off, nothing really happens, and then there's that hard work where you actually see results. And when
oh,
you, as you start
incredible.
seeing those results, then it goes, well, I don't care if it was hard. Look what's happening. But it's when you
Oh,
do the hard work and
incredible.
nothing happens, it's worse. But when it happens, it's like every bit of struggle was worth it.
Everything is worth it. And I love a challenge because every challenge I've had, I get answers to. And even
Mhm.
today, I had a wonderful experience. So I've been struggling with distribution in Ireland, and it was one of the challenges I didn't anticipate by choosing an American publisher. And it's something I had put out there, I had meditated on it, I had thought about it, and I was calm. And then I
Yeah.
got a phone call from a very famous Australian author who happens to spend some of her time living in Dublin. And out of the blue, she had been in touch with me previously, and she said, "How are you getting on with your Irish media and distribution?" And that was literally her message,
Yeah.
Sarah.
See,
I, I,
universe opening up. You need an answer. Here she is. Pay
I
attention,
sent
folks.
it to my husband and I said, "Whoa, look
Yeah.
what happened today." So I am grinning ear to
Yes.
ear with all of these little moments
Mm.
that are just unfolding. And when I say the work, put in the hard work, I am 7 days a week, 12 hours a day in this office, writing, working on promoting Yankeeland, but I have never been happier. So
Yeah.
it's work, hard work that is so rewarding. It is when you're doing it for yourself, Sarah, as you know,
Oh, yes.
wonderful podcast. It's very different, isn't
Yeah.
it? You
I've
would,
done many, many things in my life, and this is the only thing that I have got up to do despite I've done it with COVID, I've done it in -4 temperatures, I've done it in
oh,
the 30 temperatures, I've done it through all sorts of things, because I have my own different ableness. But it's the passion and the love behind it of bringing people like yourself, because I do believe inspiration begets invitation.
oh,
And when
yeah.
somebody is inspired by you and they go, well, I need to listen to my heart and soul. I need to
Mhm.
listen to all those messages that I've dismissed because my head's gone rational instead of listening to your heart, soul, and spirit, and take
Mhm.
this other path. And there's so many women like yourself that I've interviewed that have walked away from, the six-figuring,
Yeah,
careers. And they
yeah.
say it didn't matter how much money or how popular or how big I was. I'm now doing something that is so heartfelt and so meaningful. This is where the true currency is. It's in the enrichment and the abundance of what I'm
Um,
doing and who it serves.
that is beautiful, Sarah. And I would say to any woman out there, you can, at any age, I was 50
Yes.
years of age when I left behind what I had always known, stepped into the unknown. I immersed myself in the literary scene in Dublin with a backpack on my back. It was like my first day at school, Sarah, and I was never happier. And I am still foraging my way through this. And I feel more alive than I ever felt. And I try to say to people that I would rather be at the bottom of a ladder I want to climb than the top of
Yes.
a ladder that I don't want to be on.
Bravo.
So
Excellent.
when you
Yeah.
talk about the riches and the big salaries,
Yes.
it's all irrelevant if you're not happy, Sarah.
Exactly. 100%. Exactly.
Irrelevant.
And I feel there's at least two more books in you, maybe not on Yankeeland, but kind of
Beautiful.
following the same type of theme and
Beautiful.
going in another direction because whenever we transfer from one industry to another, we take all the skills and the tools and reapply them into something else that's really meaningful. But what you've accumulated and understood and knowledge that you've put in the book now
Mm.
needs to kind of come out, even if they're faction book. This is a faction book, fact and fiction close together, but continuing the story. And I think it's going to be continuing the story of mental health.
That is incredible, Sarah, and you're obviously very intuitive because we have not discussed this for your listeners. However, I've already started my next book, and it is one girl's journey through the alternative offerings, the spiritual offerings in
Yes,
life.
yes, yes.
So that is incredible. That
Mm,
is exactly what the theme is going to be. And it is
excellent.
loosely based on my own journey when I met adversity
Mm,
and I was dealing with my own struggles and I sought healing. And we are in a
mm,
very rich environment in Ireland. We are so lucky to have so much on our doorstep. I have the Hill of Tara right beside me, which is a very ancient, very, very ancient site and filled with filled with spirituality. So that's exactly the area that I'm going into. So that
excellent.
is
Yes.
well done. You're obviously very intuitive, Sarah.
Well, good. That means you'll be coming back again and sharing that book as well.
Great. I would love to. I would love to because your readership is and your viewership is exactly, they're, you know, authentic,
Mm,
value-driven people in society who really want to shape humanity for the good. And that's where I too want to support
yeah.
in life. And I have no interest in the commercialization of the
Mm,
other aspects of our world. If I can help one person, if one person feels inspired by our talk today or feels motivated, Sarah, I've done my job and so have you. That's how
yeah.
I feel.
100%. That's really what it's about.
Mm.
And um, I mean, I started this journey at 57. I'm 70 now. I kind of made a contract with the universe. Okay, I'll go until 90 as long as I can see, hear, and talk.
Beautiful. Oh
So,
my goodness.
so that's up to the gods whether they want me to do that, but that's the kind of the contract I've written there. I've now, instead
Beautiful.
of doing 7 days a week and 9 shows a week, I've now cut back to 3 or 4 a week. And I have my grandsons and my future, hopefully,
Oh,
granddaughter, which I'm
oh,
thinking it's a girl, we don't know yet, little
oh.
Fable. And watching, I waited so long to become a grandmother. So now watching them grow. And I have balance in life now, which kind of I was denying myself for a while. And I think that's the important. We've got
That
to
is
make sure,
so
even
beautiful.
when you're doing something you really love, to make sure
Mm,
you still do have a balance on the other things. Otherwise, you might resent what you love because there is no
mm.
balance on the other side of the scale. So it's
That's
still
really
find your balance.
important.
Mm-hmm.
That is really important. And I'm a mother of three children, and I have tried to ensure that my children have had a lot of what maybe I didn't get to
Yes.
experience. And I don't mean material goods.
Yeah.
I mean, been given the truth, been loved, been, in an environment where they can flourish, and protected, which is very important. So I very much value those moments. And
Mm-hmm.
Sarah is just those moments of being, and I can understand being with your grandchildren. What
Yeah.
a gift! What a
What a,
beautiful gift for them and you.
because they show us their soul. My
Mm.
my 4-year-old grandson is an earther. He loves the earth.
Oh,
He's going to be earthbound. My next child grandson with the Down syndrome, he's cosmic. He's most certainly a sky child. And I believe that this next one comes in is going to be the force to be reckoned with. She's a Libran, so she's definitely going to be fighting for rights and balance. That I am a Libran too. She might be born on my birthday. Who knows? Maybe or just around her. Um, but I also feel that I can feel the force in her. I can feel that force. She's going to be somebody fiercely protective over her brothers, but somebody that really fights for rights. And I look at her mother and father, and they're both very much like that. So, but
Beautiful.
for me as a grandmother, I'm guiding their spirit and their soul. That's
Oh,
my journey there.
beautiful.
And
Beautiful.
but spending time with grandchildren or animals and just
Mm,
being in their presence, in their energy, where they're at, is
mm,
such a wonderful opening up to the universal wisdom and energy, and it's such a beautiful journey to take. So I encourage everybody, to look, if you don't have grandchildren, volunteer somewhere or do something, because
yeah.
being around kids, oh my God, they're just so intuitive and they're so divine, with so much that we can learn from them. And
Oh,
it's kind
yeah.
of getting out of our own stuffiness, or that societal dictation again, and just letting it be and being present with them.
Just letting it. Well, I remember when I had a miscarriage. My daughter was about 2 and my son was 4, and I had miscarried, and it was my first miscarriage. I was very distraught, and we were lying in bed the middle of the night. Our children had come into the bed. They had heard my husband and I, and again, another moment I will never forget. My husband and I and my 2-year-old daughter said, "Look, Mum, look at all the angels flying above our head."
Uh-huh. Yes.
And she is what you speak about your granddaughter who's to be born. That is my
Yeah.
daughter. She is a beautiful, strong,
Yeah.
my middle child, powerful woman. And when she was a toddler, people would say to me, "Oh, you better put manners on her or she's going to be a challenge." And I always said, "Absolutely not, because she is going to need that spirit as a woman in this
Absolutely.
world." And I absolutely love it. And I encourage it every step of the way. And I know you will with your
Yeah,
granddaughter, Sarah. It's
absolutely.
beautiful.
And
Beautiful.
we talked about how, sorry, to promote this book, the Our Forgotten Children book, which I
Yeah.
promoted it, 15
Yeah.
chapters in there. It is about that. The system that is around raising our children today is actually raising dysfunctional adults, because
Mm,
again, it's all about box, conform, become what we tell you to become. Don't be the essence and the spirit of who
mm,
you are. And I think if we nurture the spirit and the essence of who they are, let them go on their own self-discovery, just give them the tools and the guidance and the structure in which to do it, we would have an incredible human race. And I feel
mm,
that is where we need to go. We need to trust our spirit. We stop being afraid of things happening to you. They're happening for a reason. Tap into them, ask why, what am I meant to do with it? And then be willing to receive the answer. It doesn't come to you like an Amazon delivery. It will come
yeah,
to you in all sorts of ways. People you meet at the coffee shop or in the grocery store, or somebody that picks your phone up from years ago. You never know how it's going to come, but be open and willing to receive.
100% Sarah, and relax into it. It took me years to learn that. I wish I knew you 30 years ago. It took me a long time to learn that when you're faced with adversity or challenges, there's a message,
Yes.
and it's just to slow it all down and listen. And I
Mm.
really do wish I knew that when I was younger. And that's why I hope in the next story that I write, it will maybe give people a little bit of direction and guidance into how to navigate that.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's such a wonderful gift. And Sarah, having people like you in our world who help guide people, give them direction. And what I love is you're so confident in tapping into your intuition. Like that is a gift. That is beautiful.
I'm afraid it's just me. It just,
Beautiful. So yeah, well,
for
well
many
done
years,
you.
I had to suppress and hide it because it was
Oh,
not accepted. But now
yeah,
it's that I've done the work where I am what I am, as Popeye says, and take me or leave
beautiful.
me. But I am the spirit, and then that's the spirit who will talk. And
Beautiful.
no apologies.
That is wonderful. That is the beauty of the diversity of our world. And I feel so blessed meeting people like you in my life. I can tell you that I would not be the person I am today if I hadn't listened to my spiritual
Exactly. I'm
heart
so glad
center.
you did.
Oh,
I'm
so am
so
I.
glad you did. And I'm so
Yeah,
glad you didn't
yeah,
dismiss it. And again,
yeah,
so many people I've interviewed through the years that have come from big corporate,
yeah.
really being high up there, and then following something that's tugging at the very core of them.
Mhm.
Like, I have
Mhm.
to do this. And many of them, it tugged at them and they didn't pay attention. So they ended up with the cosmic two by four. right? And
Mm.
then from those ashes, they had to rise. You didn't wait for the cosmic 2x4. You were at the crossroads, and that message that came to it, you honored that message. You respected Bridget and that message. And you trusted your own instincts to take that. And in that, if nothing else out of the book, which there's plenty to get out of the book, that alone is the fact that you honored her. You knew you had to write this story. You knew you had to let go of your past. You knew you had to allow her to come in and guide you and direct you on this. You surrendered to that. And it's being vulnerable yourself. It's a beautiful gift that you gave yourself and you've given us through the book.
Yeah, well, that's beautiful, Sarah, and lovely to hear you say that because it is vulnerable. It is, particularly when you are an author, and I know you have publications out there, and it's very vulnerable and it's very scary because
Yes.
you're birthing something, you're bringing it out into the world, and you've no idea how to be received, and it's really humbling when you do get the recognition for that. It is really humbling and to touch people. That's all I want to do. I want people to connect with me. I would love to hear from readers. I would love to contact me on my website because I do believe I will be able to support and help some people on some of the topics that are raised. And only because of my own journey. I have lived experience, and I know you do too, Sarah. And that's why we are where we are. And it's so important to honor that. So I
Yeah.
hope is of huge help to readers. I really do. My
I
greatest.
think book clubs are great, but I'm going to go a step further and have a podcast club where you listen to a
Ooh,
podcast like this. Everybody take notes of what they got out of it. And then after, over a glass of wine, talk about what you each got out of it, because each person will have something else that it triggered for them or it opened up for them. And now you discuss it as a whole, right? And
oh,
and then
wow.
becomes very transcending for people. So whether you are doing a book club and you're talking about what the book does, or whether it's the podcast, and I really do
Wow.
include podcast parties, um, you're listening. My motto is listen, learn, and apply. So you're listening, you're learning,
Beautiful.
and the application is in the sharing what you've learned and what there is still. It's an open door to what else you're still meant to learn. There isn't full
Yeah.
stop, that's it, on you go. This is about, it's opened up so many more perspectives and understandings or inquiry. And that's what you
Oh,
want. If
beautiful.
we don't stay in our inquisitiveness, if we don't stay in our wonderment, if we don't stay in our exploration, then what are we?
Well, I would say that I have had a very enriched life because I've always been curious, always. And I really straddled the two worlds between the corporate, very head world and the spiritual world in Ireland because it's a bit difficult not to. We have an abundance of it, but I've I remember bringing my children when they were very young to the full moon ceremony at the Hill of Tara, and it was an incredible experience. You had druids doing this ceremony, and my children would be there, and there would be people from all over the world, and we only had to travel a couple of miles, and people were coming from Brazil and
Mm-hmm.
everywhere. And my adult children now say to me, Mum, thank you so much for exposing us to that. Because what I wanted them to do was to see that their world
Yes.
is made up of lots of
Many
different,
experiences.
yes,
Yes, yes.
lots of, and if you're living a life and if you don't experience things that are vastly different to what you do every day, you won't broaden your mind, Sarah, and you won't learn. So I would say to people, maybe a takeaway from today is go do something radically different that you would have never done before. Go check out your nearest full moon ceremony,
Mm-hmm.
and you would be amazed. And the common theme with people who are involved in that element of life, usually they are incredibly authentic and value driven. So
Yes.
there's very little aggression, there's none.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a beautiful space to be yourself. So hopefully people may take that leap and do something different this weekend.
Bridget couldn't be herself. She was
Exactly.
persecuted, misunderstood, or feared. And what
Mm,
happened to her is a consequence of that. And that in itself is a lesson to us of
mm,
never again. Do not feel
mm,
threatened to speak out. Do not feel threatened to be all that you're meant to be. do not feel threatened to stand tall in your own existence, in your own essence. And the more we do it and more we support each other in doing it, the more we become this beautiful living force, loving force that only illuminates people's lives and uplifts them and shows them a path forward. But we have to step into it in ourselves. Then we find that sisterhood, and again, men that love and support them, that we come together as this beautiful harmony. And in this beautiful, cohesive harmony, it doesn't matter what's thrown at us, it will bounce off because the harmony will keep singing. And I think that's what we desperately need in the world right now. So you talking about Bridget and all that she was repressed, this beautiful woman that came following a dream, believing in something, bigger. This was the place to do it. And then all that she faced and the restrictions and doing it, right? The lesson is we don't want to be her. We're never going to be her. We're never going to let women be her again in that restriction. And it's only going to stop if we come together as women, rise up, not with pitchforks, but with loving arms and common sense.
Beautiful, Sarah. What an incredible way to embody Yankeeland and all that it is. And that would be my greatest wish for women to know, don't be afraid of their own strength, to know what they're capable of. And you are correct in saying we're in a time where we can live
Yes.
truths, whereas Bridget couldn't.
No.
In Yankeeland, Bridget, Kate, Molly, these characters could not live their truth. We can. So let's rise up together and let's celebrate it. Let's, support each other. Let's be authentic and let's just do it.
Let's take her dream that she had and bring it into us.
Beautiful.
And go and live that dream for her. And for all the other women that have been suppressed through the years, through the centuries, right? It's in our hands, it's in our hearts, it's in our very essence. All we have to do is embrace it, become it, and be it without shame, without ridicule, without condition, and certainly without persecution.
Absolutely. And with love in our hearts and be
Absolutely.
kind.
That's the only play. Kindness is what leads you to love. Kindness and compassion, not comparison, not competition, right? It's kindness, compassion, inclusion, cohesiveness, that love that for yourself, and it exudes so much from you, right? That, the beautiful vibrational ripple effect will ignite that love within someone else just for you being. So just keep on being.
Beautiful. Absolutely beautiful, Sarah. So thank you so much. I am honored, absolutely honored to be part of this.
I'm
And
really glad you've come on and shared this. But how do people get the book? How do they reach you? Would you share all your social medias and your websites, please?
I would love to. So the book is Yankeeland, and Lacy Fure is my author name. So my website is www.lacyfure.com. I'm on social media. I'm on Instagram and I'm on Facebook, and everything is Lacy Fure. But if you also just Google or search Yankeeland, you'll find it. And the name Yankeeland, just very quickly, the reason I chose the name was because in the letters that I found, they called America Yankeeland. So when the cousins were writing to each other, and Molly would write to Bridget and say, "You got to go to Yankeeland. I have to remain here in the village for the rest of my life." And it was this Yankeeland was so filled with wonder and excitement, and I just felt what a beautiful name, because that's really what it embodied, was the dream. So that's where the name came from. So you have my website. I'm on Instagram. I have a link tree on Instagram and on my website. My book is available everywhere. So online, particularly all the way throughout Walmart. You've got Amazon. You've got Barnes and Noble, Books a Million. It's quite easy to pick it up. So yeah, I am delighted with that opportunity, Sarah, for a shout out to it. And I would love to hear from readers. So my website has an option to email me, and I really, really would love feedback. Goodreads, there's quite a lot of, I think I'm up to about 145-star reviews in the first few days. It literally only launched last week. So I would love to hear from readers, would love feedback, and I would love to answer questions, Sarah.
And if you go to Linktree, it shows the book and everywhere that you can buy it. So Linktree, Lacy Fewer, Lacyfewer. And please check it out. And, I'm always saying that books are the greatest gift you give on someone, because it's a story that keeps on giving. People can read a book and it's very satisfying, but if it's been a good book and it really resonates with you, it will keep coming out. The reflection of it, the revision, just looking at, oh, I read about that, or that happened, this happened, or you look at things differently through a different lens. And that's ultimately what you're wanting to do, is have people look at things from a different lens. And warning, don't go backwards. Number two, the people who paved the way for us, and how much change is still needed. And the only way it's going to come about is talking about it, is standing tall together, and making sure that we never allow that to happen to any woman or man ever again.
Absolutely, Sarah. Absolutely. That is just fantastic. And I hope that there's loads of learnings, loads of inspiration, loads of insight from Yankeeland. And, certainly I really do hope that I've honoured Bridget and Kate and Molly and all the women, all the characters that were in this book. So thank you so much, Sarah. I'm honoured.
And I'm looking forward to your next book. We'll have you back then and we'll talk all about that, because I'm really looking forward to your soul journey. We have a lovely genre for that, Ignite Your Heart and Soul, which I know that's going to be perfect to go under, which is all about that. So thank you so much for listening to Bridget, to listening to the universe and stepping in. You allowed. A lot of people don't allow, so you allowed and you followed. I call it blind, deaf and dumb, in order to see, hear and feel. And when you trust in that way, you will never be alone and you will always be guided. So may you continue to be guided, because you're allowing. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Sarah. I'm honoured. Thank you very much. And thank you to all your listeners and all your viewers. It's been a pleasure to reach out to everyone in Canada and all over the world, because I know you are all over the world.
I am.
So that is wonderful. Great achievement. So
that's what's beautiful about having a podcast. It doesn't go anywhere in the world, no restrictions, which is wonderful. So until next time, folks, read the book, learn about the horrors that used to go on, but also learn about the courage, the strength, and the abilities, and what we can do today. We may turn around and look at, God, that could still be happening, and how are we going to stop it? Or how do we band together to make sure it never happens again? Because if we ignore history, it will repeat. When we learn from history, we take a different direction. So until next time, folks, bye for now.
Thank you.
We hope that you enjoyed the show. There are so many more for you here on selfdiscoverywisdom.com. Just go to the podcast tag at the top there and you will see all the many genres and all 3,000 shows ready for your listening. We are here to serve you, to help you on your journey of life, and we know that through inspiration it begets invitation. We are supported by you, the listeners, and those that we interview. Anything that you can spare us in donation would be greatly accepted, and we do hope that you enjoy the next show.